Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Ron. We'll go ahead and get started. Uh, Someone texted me a question that we'll hopefully get to today. But I want to first see if I have any other questions about what we may have talked about. Last couple of sessions, we talked about the alignment of the planets uh, and what that looks like spiritually, what that means, and even compared it to some of the other messages that we've received. The other messages we've received from the solar flares to some of the eclipses that we've had, and even the just anything that I can't remember right now, but a lot of things that have happened over the last couple of years that we've noticed and sort of studied and looked at in a spiritual manner. So before I ask this question, are there any other questions that someone may have based on what we discussed yesterday?
Ron, I have a question, but it's not based on what we talk about, but then it could be.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question, and we'll come back to this one.
When we relinquish our free will, do we start becoming more aware of the spiritual?
Oh, I like that. When we relinquish our free will, my answer is yes. That's what it's all about. And something else I've noticed, at least with me, that is relinquishing is a journey. It's something that we say and we do, and we mean it. Of course, you mean it. But example, here's what I'm saying. I don't want to be confusing. What I'm saying is we relinquish our free will, but still, when someone says the Bible uh, has been tampered with, that challenges everything, because that's been our truth. That's been our go-to all of our lives and our parents' lives. And so when you said Jesus is not real and should not have been there, that too is, you see what I mean? So you relinquish your free will, and there's still some things that challenge you that are hard to deal with sometimes. But yes, I don't think that would have be in the place that we are now spiritually if we had not relinquished our free will and did so voluntarily and with expectations of seeing our spirituality. And I hope I didn't mess that up too bad. Anybody else want to address that, please?
I have a follow-up question with that. And so how do we just give up? What does it mean to just give up our free will? That would help as well.
I really think we're in the process of doing that. That's why I said it's a journey, it's a process. I can say it, but as things are challenged, because if one of the things I think someone may have mentioned it yesterday, we it's I remember when we dealt with um being a Christian, and for some of us how difficult that was. The Jesus thing I mentioned, and we haven't said this, but if we truly have come to the place where we see the femininity of God and understand what that means, that it's not God, it's a goddess, uh, and then what we've done is we've erased God. We've erased the God that we've known all of our lives, that image. So those things, I think, uh, are related to what Audrey was talking about yesterday, because I have felt the same thing in trying to look at where we go next. It's like, where are we? what are we doing in this space now, and what's next for us? And all of that is because we've given up our free will. And I think those are measurements to show us just that we are not trying to hold on to anything, but we are searching for truth. Evelyn, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but and again,
I
I
see that.
invite anybody else to help me with this, if you would, please.
I wanted to make sure I heard it. When we give up our free will, do we become more spiritual? Is that it?
I said,
Yes,
I asked, did we become more spiritually aware? Yes.
Okay. Well, to give up the free will involves more than words, right? So when you say you give up your free will, there are events that happen in your life, and your response to those events will let you know how sincere you are about it. Not to mention the fact that when you talk about giving up your free will, you have these thoughts in your mind about, can I really do that? Does this really make sense? And when you have those thoughts in your mind, you answer those questions in your mind, and you have these events that take place in your life as a result of you giving up your free will, your response to them help you solidify your decision within you. And when you are comfortable with it, what you will realize by looking at it retrospectively is that you have become more sensitive to the spiritual messages that is always being sent to us. Does that make sense, Evelyn?
Yes, sir. It does.
So does that answer your question? I guess that's what I should have asked you.
It does. And what you and Ron had said, yeah, it makes sense now.
Okay.
But I believe there's more.
It sounds like you have more. Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. But I'm just listening, and what the both of you said is resonating with me. Just that I know it's more where I was at what you told me. That's fine.
Good question.
I kind of have a question to follow up with that. What exactly do we mean by free will now in the context of what we know now versus what we knew 2 years ago? What do we mean by free will? If you're sort of dealing with the laws of Ma'at, and you're living by the principles, and the principles say, I do not covet anybody's property, or whatever. I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Yes.
So in a way, you give up your free will because you're living by that particular principle. So you choose not to do certain kinds of things so that you can live by that particular principle. So my question is, what exactly is free will? And is the concept still relative to where we are now and at this point in our spiritual walk?
Excuse me. When I first made that statement about giving up my free will, I saw it in the context of making decisions about my spiritual understandings, spiritual growth, understanding the scriptures, being able to articulate the truth that I see within in the scriptures, because I realized that academically I was not equipped to teach the scriptures. And I knew that academically I needed to take a step back, and I needed the spiritual understandings of the scriptures. So during that period, that was my baby step towards where we are now. And because of my desire to give up my free will, I gave up all of my ambitions and desires, everything. The primary objective was to be able to understand and teach other people the truth about who they are. Now, here we are at this point. We understand the principles of Ma'at are the guiding forces in our lives. When we embrace the principles of Ma'at as the guiding forces in our lives, then that with it in itself says that we have given up our free will. Why? Because our free will has been predicated on Christianity. And what Christianity has shown us about the scriptures and Jesus and God, etc. Now, what happened is, because of the teachings and the research and the desires that all of us have expressed, when we were introduced to and we begun to seek to understand the principles of Ma'at, and when we saw the reality of the origin of Jesus as well as the scripture, and when we embraced the reality of the divine deity being feminine, that within itself was saying we have given up all of our free will as it pertains to Christianity. We are open now to whatever the spirit, whatever the universe seeks to give us. The understandings, the guidance, it doesn't matter. Whatever we see, no matter how controversial it may be, we are willing to follow it. We are willing to embrace it, because it not only does it resonate so deeply, but it has its origins in antiquity far beyond what Christianity could ever dream of. Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yes, and I agree with you. We have a new paradigm now. So free will as it relates to Christianity, I think doesn't quite apply anymore.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But at the time that I did it,
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing I had that was applicable at the time. You know what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I had no other paradigm.
Right. None of us did.
But I knew there was something wrong with the one I had embraced, because it did not feel right. It no longer resonated. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at that point that the idea of Jesus was not resonating, because it still was, but not the way I thought it would. And that is the reason I said to most of you, not all of you, if you come to be taught, I will take your Jesus away from you. I did not mean that in the context of now. I meant that in the context of Christianity has taught us things that were wrong. And the translations will show us what Jesus was really saying. That's what I meant. However, if I had known that I was saying what is happening now, I don't even know whether I could have done that or said that. So, but now in that context, taking your Jesus away from you is not so much as taking it away as it is making you aware of the non-existence of this entity that we have been taught about. Yet, the spiritual principles of antiquity that have been assigned to Jesus are real. Does that make sense? Okay.
I am I'm reminded of something I remember when I first came to Greater New Faith. You said, and I don't remember the exact words, but the thing that you pursue will pursue you or overtake you, something like that. You remember saying that, Pastor?
I do.
And I think that's where we are, just kind of, even saying that no one knew what this would look like. But I think that's where, I think that's applies here too.
Well, the other one is that um, I ask you to follow me as I follow God. And when we see God, God will not look like what we think God is. I had no clue as to what I was saying. I had no clue of understanding that we would see ourselves Elohim, right? And when we saw that, I thought that was it until I was shown more. And the more that I was shown is, you now Elohim, you know who you are. You are the image and likeness, therefore you have the same characteristics. Now you need to understand those characteristics. The characteristics of Elohim are feminine. And then when I saw that, I started looking at it in relationship to the references to a deity, a supreme being, or a being that has created everything that is. When I began to look at that, I saw from the very beginning that it was not a he, it was a she. And I struggled with that, of course. And in my continued research and my understandings of it, what I kept seeing was this, that the deity who brought us into existence was not a male until Christianity came into existence, until the Greeks invaded Kemet. And also, what began to make sense to me is the whole concept of the Eve gene. And the understanding of the Eve gene is not just some anthropological finding. It's not just some genetic research. It's more than that. When we look at the DNA, we see the DNA we receive from our parents, but when we look at mitochondrial DNA in an African female, we see genetic markings for every race on the face of the earth. And that's when I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that the supreme entity that brought everything into existence, that birthed everything that is a feminine entity. And it was further shown to me with the understandings of how the mind of the representation of femininity functions. Understanding that in the womb, the blood of the fetus carries up at the left side, it begins to feed, left side of the heart, begins to feed the brain. And the testosterone, if it's a male, it stops on the left side. If it's a female, testosterone on the left side and estrogen on the right. And the female can use both sides of the brain simultaneously or alternately. Males have to stop and process before they can do that. That convinced me beyond any shadow of a doubt that femininity is the essence, the aspect of the creator of everything that is, which, with other words, God is not a man in terms of masculinity, God is a woman in terms of femininity, feminine energy. So all of that came into play for me to process from where I was to where we are. Does that make sense?
This is
Yeah.
Ramel. I have a
So-
question.
Okay, but it was not an easy road. That's all I'm trying to say. Go ahead. Question?
You're not, yeah, you're not saying that the creator is not both feminine and masculine, right? But you are saying that the feminine was dominant, for lack of another word.
Let me tell you what I'm really saying.
Okay.
That would that would not be masculinity if it had not been birthed from femininity. That's what I'm really saying.
Okay. Got it.
And I'm not talking about a man and a woman. Please understand that. I'm saying that everything that came into existence had to be birthed. And if you look at a flower, an oak tree, a rabbit, or a cow, everything that's in this earth was birthed. Everything. Everything in this earth had its genesis in a womb of darkness. Everything. Everything grows from darkness, from resistance, to a root system that establishes itself before it reaches for the light. And when that root system is established, regardless of what it is, when it reaches for the light, there is absolutely no resistance whatsoever. It flows towards the light without resistance. But to establish the root system in darkness, it meets resistance. Why? Because of the indicative nature of darkness. The nature of darkness is wisdom. And you will not get understanding of wisdom if you are not determined to be rooted in wisdom itself. And when you are rooted in it with a desire to understand it, that's when you begin to push towards the light. And that's when you begin to see the light, you see a flicker of what truth is. And the more you pursue it, the more light you are shown. And the more light you are shown, the more light you desire. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm sorry, does somebody else have a question? Ramil, were you done or you had another question?
No, I was going to say, I do think I understand better what you just spoke about, growing out of darkness or growing due to darkness into light. Is that like, I'm equating that to when we talked about the tree and sunlight. Trees come out of the ground darkness and they grow straight up towards the sun, the light. Do I have that analogy just about right?
Yes. Actually, if you think about a tree is really a pattern of who we are. It is my belief that the reason that the priests of antiquity reference trees so frequently is because they understood the nature of a tree. The gravitopic, a tree is gravioptic. And the gravioptic means that a tree, the roots, the seed of that tree begins to be controlled by gravity. Gravity pulls the roots from that seed. And that seed, the roots of that seed meets resistance as it pushes through the soil to establish itself. And once that root system is established, now the tree begins to push through the soil, reaching for the light without any resistance whatsoever. However, that root system looks exactly like that the tree does when it is beginning to grow limbs, reaching for the light. That is indicative of what happens in a womb, in the womb. With that, with the fetus establishing itself, attaching itself to the natal cord, and receiving all the nourishment that it cannot receive for itself, and defying everything by virtue of having the nostrils protected from the fluids so it doesn't drown, and making sure that before it reaches for light, that the lungs are developed. And when it reaches for light, once it exits that womb, it does not have the same resistance it had while it was in that womb, growing and enlarging the cavern that the baby was protected in. Does that make sense? The cavity that protects the baby began to grow as the baby did. And that in itself is indicative of resistance to growth. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
No.
Okay. I hope I'm making sense to everyone.
You are. You said something a minute ago, though. The answer to the question was if you have masculinity because it was birthed by femininity. A while back, when we were looking at balance, what balance looks like, and what we were looking at it from the perspective of a womb, God being masculine and feminine. What is go back over that part again, balance and because I think we're at a different place now.
Okay. First of all, let's understand something. There is something above Elohim. Let's understand that. Let's understand that Elohim is the principle of our supreme creator that brought into existence what we see with our eyes and what we are able to search for with our eye. Okay? Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
So, when we think about masculinity and femininity, it was not created at all. It always existed. And it's the thought of the creator, the desire of the entity of light, Ein Sof, if you will, that brought into existence this feminine energy for the express purpose of bringing into existence not only femininity, but masculinity as a seed to propagate the growth of humanity, because that was the plan from the beginning. Are you still with me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. That being the plan from beginning is the reason that every human, every physical human in this earth came from a womb. And the womb from which it came also had masculine energy in it. That is the seed of desire from the creator of everything that is, for the express purpose of continuing the existence of humans in this earth realm until it gets to a place of spiritual maturity where it can bring into existence uh, what is it? As above, so is below. Meaning that it has the ability to procreate within the framework of time and space until it gets to a state of spiritual maturity where it recognizes, where it embraces, where it desires above everything else to be as it was before it was placed in this human body, before it became a visitor or a occupant of this human body. And now where we are recognizing that, we're beginning to see that time has sped up. We see that. We also see that we're beginning to be shown more and more about the reality of what we call astrological events. And this is showing us how the universe functions and how the universe influences the energy of that we receive, and how the universe impacts how we think. Now, the reason that feminine energy, the reason that femininity is the goddess, is not because of dominance. It is because masculinity is a seed, it is not a womb, and it cannot bring anything into existence. And European concepts have tainted that. European concepts have tainted it to the extent that men are very defensive when we make statements like this. And the reason men are so defensive about it is because there is something deep inside of them that's telling them they're wrong. You don't fight as hard as they do without knowing something is not right within you. And that defensiveness blinds them to the truth. That desire to dominate, to rule over, blinds them to everything that has the life to bring into existence as above, so is below. Now where we are in seeing and embracing the divinity of femininity, we are not saying that femininity is better than, superior to masculinity. That's not what we're saying at all. It is no different than having a coach who coaches a team, regardless of whether it's a cheerleading squad or a basketball team, it doesn't matter. That coach is not superior to the player. That coach draws up the plays. That coach guides them because that coach has intricate understanding of the game. When we talk about the detailed thoughts and presentations of femininity, we are not saying anything other than the coach has an intricate understanding of wisdom, an intricate understanding of the pieces, the nuances of what it takes to propagate life in this earth. It doesn't mean that masculinity is not needed. It doesn't mean that masculinity is inferior. It simply means that we are wired differently. And when we make any efforts to resist the way that we are wired, chaos ensues. And as a result of that, we end up living in a world, in an environment that we are currently experiencing. Does that make sense? Come on, guys.
Gosh, yes, it does.
Yes.
Any questions or comments about that? Now, let me push it a little bit further. When we talk about this, the resistance that comes from masculinity is no different than the resistance that the root experiences when it pushes through the earth beneath the surface of the earth, establishing itself. The resistance from masculinity simply ends up creating a stronger desire for femininity to rise to the place where it is wired to be. And the reason that we have been so successful in traveling this journey, the reason that the understandings that we have been shown are so clear to us is because when I talked about the denial of free will, it simply was saying that I am not resisting anything that you desire to show me, neither am I resisting any journey that you desire me to embark upon. And now that we understand that the principles of Ma'at are saying pretty much the same thing, but differently in that we are not speaking to it from the foundation of Christianity, but from the foundation of truth itself, from the foundation of spirituality. And because of these principles of Ma'at that we have embraced, we are beginning to experience the spiritual presence, not of the spiritual presence of the Creator as much as the spiritual presence of our being, of ourselves. The spiritual presence of self must be realized before you can appreciate the spiritual presence of the Creator. Does that make sense? Without
Yes,
elevation,
it does.
Yes, it does.
if you're not elevated, it's impossible for you to see and function spiritually. That's all I'm saying. I'm done.
So I have a question then. So the concept about I want to go back to the feminine, everything came from the feminine energy. So the concept of Joseph and Mary, how does that line up? Because see, Mary didn't have a sexual partner or whatever. Does that make sense what I'm saying? How does
I know exactly where you're
how
going.
does that concept, yeah, how does that line up with what we're talking about as far as with the feminine energy?
The reason that Mary and Joseph were brought into existence at the conference at Ephesus and the one at Chalcedon is because they meaning the Greek/Romans who brought into existence Christianity, desired to have an answer to Isis and Osiris. And Mary and Joseph was their response to Isis and Osiris, to bring into existence a God child. That the concept of Jesus replaced Serapis. And the concept of Serapis replaced the reality of Heru. Heru is the S-U-N of Iris and Osiris. This was never about a human child being born to be a god in the earth. This was about concepts of masculinity and femininity. If those of you have read the story, remember, it was not the male image, it was not Osiris who brought itself into existence, was resurrected. It was Isis who brought the parts together and put this entity back together, and it did not have a penis, and because it could not be found. And Isis was able to be impregnated by desire. As a result, Heru came into existence. This has nothing to do with idol gods. It has nothing to do with gods as we have been taught. This is simply a concept that's saying that life was brought into this earth from femininity. And the seed was present, but it was not utilized to bring into this earth the first humans. And from the point of the first humans being brought into the earth, from that point forward, the seed of masculinity was needed, was utilized for the purpose of giving birth to what's in this earth. Does that make sense?
Not yet, because that's a lot, but I know it will eventually.
This is what I'm saying to you. As simple as I know to put it right now. What I'm saying is that Mary and Joseph was an offshoot of a concept that white people did not understand, and they made it up as they went. And the concept that they were trying to replace was the reality of a message that the creator of everything was sending to us. The creator was saying that out of the womb of femininity, everything will be birthed. And from that point of birth, femininity is wired to be the goddess, and masculinity is wired to be the seed. And that seed joins with that egg, and that's what brings humans into existence. But not only humans, it is the womb that brings everything into existence. And there is not a womb for human existence for a Chinese or Japanese and Native American and a European. All of them come from the same womb. And from that womb came everyone. And because of that, now the seed of masculinity is needed for the birth of children. Does that make sense? Well, more sense, I should ask.
Yes, and I think once I get the concept of Heru, Osiris, Isis, and all of those concepts, then I could better understand
Okay, let me give you the
what you're
concept.
talking about.
Let me give you the concept. And God created the sun and the moon, right?
I'm with you.
So out of the womb of the creator came the sun and the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you still with me?
Yes.
So out of Isis and Osiris, let's see Isis and Osiris as being what we have been told is God in the story, the creation story, right?
Okay.
So that concept is what brought into existence the sun and the moon, okay? Can you see that?
Yes.
And the sun rules the day, and the moon gives light to the night, right? Are you with me?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, don't leave it now. So the sun is the life of everything that exists because it is the light, right?
Yes.
That's masculinity in terms of the seed, okay, of life.
Okay.
Now, the way the woman or the female gives birth is in the darkness, isn't it?
Okay.
So the moon is the light of the darkness, right? So the feminine birth that takes place rather from the feminine womb comes from a dark place into the light, and the moon is a reminder of that because the moon has an effect on the menstrual cycle of a female.
Okay.
Which means that it influences the cycle of birth. So if we take both of those and put them together spiritually, what we began to see is that seed is a seed of life, but that seed of life will die if it's not in a womb of nurturing and is nurtured in the darkness. And then the darkness seeks the light because the moon does not have light itself, does not have a seed itself. The light of the moon is a reflection of the sun. Can you see that?
Yes, and that was going to be my next question, but yes, you answered that.
So Mary and Joseph is about two people who had a boy. This story of reality is not about that. It's about the birth of masculinity and femininity in the earth. It's about the sustaining of life in the earth. It is saying that the seed of life itself and the egg or the womb of life itself has to become one in order for life to continue in the earth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is anyone confused? If you're confused, you don't know what to ask, just say, I don't know what to ask. And if I'm looking at you, raise your hand if you don't know what to ask.
I don't know what to ask.
Okay. All I'm saying is this, that we have been taught that Mary and Joseph brought into the earth God. And what we have been shown is the origin of what they call Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And if we go to antiquity, the place of beginnings, what we began to see is that life, it came into this earth through the womb of a feminine, of femininity. What we also see is that when we specifically make application of birth to humans, we see a seed and a womb, and that seed and that egg becoming a zygote, and from that becomes a baby, all right? A fetus, then a baby. If we look at it overall, in terms of everything that exists in this material world, what we see is that there is no life, there is no sustaining of life in this earth without the S-U-N. Christianity taught us life comes from the S-O-N. Eternal life comes from the S-O-N. That is not what was in the original text. It's the S-U-N that sustains life in the earth. And there is no life in the earth if it's not for the moon, meaning that if it's not for the feminine womb, the dark place within the womb of femininity, that dark place of wisdom must not only be nurtured, it must be impregnated in order for understanding to be birthed. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Catherine? Huh?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm saying is this: that the physical sun and the physical moon are physical manifestations of a spiritual truth that teaches us that life comes from the sun. The seed of life comes from the sun, and the womb of life gives birth, and the sustaining of that life is the seed of the sun, is the sun itself. What does that mean? How do we see that? Why is it that in every African village, there is a mother of that village, and the mother of that village does the nurturing for the entire village? The mother of that village is involved in every decision that's made in that village. The hunting, the securing of sustenance for living, the protection, all of this comes from the seed, masculinity. That is the sun. That is representative of the preservation of life. You can see that very clearly, especially in a lion pride. When you look at that male lion makes provisions for the territory that they live in. The male lion protects that territory. The female lion is the provider for everything within that lion. What did I just say? The lion.
Territory.
No, the group of lions.
Pride.
Pride, yeah, within that pride. Now, does that mean that the female is weaker? It doesn't. It means that the female is wired to do that and the male is wired to do that. When we were influenced by the invasion of Europeans, all of that was changed by Europeans. Because of physical strength, males began to dominate females because they were more brutal, because they had no compassion. They had no problems murdering anyone who got in their way. That is not how the mind of femininity works. The African has bought into the mindset of masculinity from a European concept. And as a result of that, we are experiencing not only the violence, but we also experiencing the chaos that comes as a result of that. Men manipulating women. Men they are the money makers in terms of a job, and they're trying to use that to manipulate and control femininity. We see that all the time. We see that men who are taught that you are the man of the house, always trying to run something and getting in trouble trying to do it because he messes up, as opposed to understanding you are the man in the house. And just because you have an idea, it doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. When you consult femininity, I'm not talking about you have to have a husband and wife. I'm talking about femininity, period. That's when you began to see how the order of things has been wired. We have been conceptualized by European Christianity, which is simply a European nationalism that is designed to control the world. If it was not designed to control the world, why is it that Christianity went in before the guns? So the African way is that the woman is wired, the femininity is wired for what it does. Let's respect that as we desire femininity to respect the way that we masculinity is wired. Does that make sense? Come on, y'all.
It does. It makes sense.
Yes.
And I know this is uncomfortable because men have browbeaten us. Men have browbeaten us into believing that church ain't church if a man ain't in the pulpit. Church ain't church if a man is not a deacon. Church ain't church if a man is not a trustee. Church ain't church if a man doesn't serve communion. If a woman does it, that's a problem. If a woman is in the pulpit, she's not supposed to be there. Why? Do you guys know the real reason that men say that women should not be in the pulpit? I'm serious. This is not rhetorical.
No, I don't.
The reason men say that women are not supposed to be in the pulpit is because a woman is unclean when her menstrual cycle is on. And if her cycle is on, she is defiled in the pulpit. Deal with that. I'm waiting.
Pastor Jack, I always say, well, what if they had a hysterectomy?
It don't matter.
You know?
It's not about,
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's not about your menstrual cycle. It's about you being a woman, period. That's where that came from. let me share an experience. This particular church did not allow females to wear pants. They made a grave mistake. They invited me to teach. And that mistake that they made was exacerbated by the fact that Phoebe went with me. The first 2 nights, we were fine. But one night she decided that she would go wear a pantsuit. And when we got to the door, she realized she had on a pantsuit. And she said, oh my God, they don't allow women to wear pants. And I said to her, I do. And she said, but they don't. And my words to her were, the hell with what they said. I guarantee you, nobody's gonna say anything to you. And we went into that church. I taught, nobody said a word. And the next time we went there to teach, women had on pants. So if you really believe that, how come you didn't say something to her? You see where I'm coming from?
Her husband
Because
works
of you.
a lot.
Because they know are you trying to say that they think that the preacher go cuss?
Mm-mm.
We're not
They know
trying.
They know it.
Anyway. But you understand what I'm saying? The principle of what I'm saying, rather. Men, that's a control mechanism. Now, why is it that you would ever seek to control anyone? Because you're afraid of them. You want to know what they're doing at all times because you are afraid of what they might do or say. Men are the most scary people on earth. That's why they're the most dangerous.
You know,
Challenge that,
why-
please.
while you were talking, I was thinking about something. We've talked about the Petri dish a number of times, but there are other species of animals out there. I mean, from insects to wasps to bees or different species of fish, or that whatever is necessary to procreate to keep the species going, a female will
They're
appear.
becoming. Yeah.
It'll just become a female, and that to me is always amazed me. That whatever is needed comes from, you know.
Let me show you something, Ron. Something that we may not thought about. How many ants do you think is in an anthill? That's a foot high. Think about that. Thousands, tens of thousands. Only one female,
One female.
one queen. And that queen runs everything because that's how she's wired, right?
Mm-hmm.
That queen is killed. Another ant becomes feminine in order to keep the, what you call those ant things?
Colony.
The ant colony alive. To keep it functioning the way it was wired to function. You
I
see
have a
the
question.
same, let me finish. Okay, baby. We see the same principle with the elephants, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Myra.
My question is, if that female ant dies, the queen, what is put out there energy-wise that let the eggs know, hey, we need this to survive?
Nothing. It is innate. They are never disconnected, ever. If you look at an ant colony, they always work in unison. Every single one of those ants know that queen is dead when that queen dies.
Not only do they know, it is believed anyway, scientifically, that the whole colony goes into search mode for the next queen. So what that means is they try to find the strongest ant, the one that whatever strength looks like to an ant. I guess the healthiest one to be the next queen. So,
We
that's
would
just
call it the
always
one,
amazing, huh?
we would call it the one who exemplifies the strongest leadership abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what they call that, we don't know because I don't speak ant.
But too, doesn't the scripture say study the ant? Isn't that in there too?
Probably. I don't
In
know.
in the Bible? Yeah.
George,
Okay.
you had to ask Georgia, somebody who a Bible scholar. I forget stuff like that until I have to teach it, then it come back to me. But there's some folk who just know what's in there. You know what I'm talking about, Evan?
Yes, sir. But it is in there, I believe.
Okay. Now, are there any questions about, I know I said a lot, but are there any questions about what I've said? Because everything I've said, I've been shown as I'm talking to you. I don't give it a chance to rehearse because I don't know what's coming, you know? And I'm grateful for that.
I had a text question. Do you want to go to it tonight?
Go ahead. It's like 7 minutes after 7, so.
Okay. This question says, yesterday, Pastor talked about the sun being connected to the earth by two portals, the north and the south portal. He said the sun gives energy to the earth. You want to go over those portals you want to go over that for a minute, just so before I read the question?
Read the question.
Huh? Okay.
Read the question and I will go over it from, in conjunction to it. Yeah.
Okay. My question is, could this be representation of the heart? For example, the sun represents the heart and is critical for the body to survive. It pumps oxygenated blood to the body via the arteries and receives deoxygenated blood from the body through the veins. If the sun is a reflection of the natural world, does the earth also give energy to the sun, similar to the veins in the body? Also, does the sun cleanse the energy received from the earth to then return it back to the earth?
Okay.
So it's two parts there.
First part. Those two cylinders are portals that I mentioned, and the teacher should have received that article. I don't know whether he had opportunity to look at it, but anyway, those two portals are portals that were recently found or recently acknowledged in terms of their existence. And what they found is that every 8 minutes, through those portals, is transmitted energy from the sun. The purpose of it, they don't know scientifically. They don't even understand the concept of every 8 minutes. Now, to the question. I believe that is exactly what happens. That the sun transmits energy on a continuous basis every 8 minutes to us. And in between that 8 minutes, I do believe that the energy from us is returned to the sun and it repurposes it. What am I saying? Our desires to understand truth, our desires to understand what was so from the beginning, our desires are energy. And as our desires are transmitted through that portal also transmits the energy via our ancestors to give us the understandings that we desire so we can continue this journey of bringing balance to humanity. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I do see it as oxygenated blood coming from the sun and I see it as Venus blood going back to the sun. And that, of course, is an example, not exactly what happened in terms of reality, okay? That is a principle. And that Venus blood is transformed into oxygenated blood before it comes back. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Now, I think it's a step further, but I want to make sure that we see what I'm just describing, or making an attempt to describe anyway. And the example that's being offered for the functions of these portals. Are you able to see that parallel? If you are able to see that parallel, say yes. If you're not, say no. If you don't know, say I don't know. But don't be quiet, because I want to make sure you get in this.
Yeah, I see it. I don't know about everybody else, but
Okay.
I don't know if
see
I
it,
quite see it.
I'll come back to you.
But I have
Okay,
a-
Vermeer.
but I
Go
have
ahead,
a
Audrey.
question too. Something you said made me think though that it was the sun is transmitting energy to us, but like the Venus, the deoxygenated blood going back to the sun, could that also be the energy of the ancestors goes back to be reoxygenated to come back to us?
I believe that the ancestors are the conduit through which all of this takes place. The
Okay.
ancestors are already in that. If we want to continue this example, right? The ancestors would be indicative of oxygenated blood. They have exited these bodies and they see the reality of what truth is. And they are the portal or they are the transmitter of our deoxygenated blood, or that goes back to the sun to be oxygenated. Does that make sense? To be transformed. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Vermeer. Thank you, Audrey.
Yes,
What part
thank you,
don't see?
Audrey. I think it's going to take me a minute.
I
I
think
don't know that I grasp it all at the same time.
I think I'm gonna give you a minute to tell me what you don't see yet.
Okay.
It's just the whole gamut of it, that the example that you don't understand.
No, I think I got a little lost until Audrey asked the question about the ancestors and deoxynization. When you said it goes to Venus,
Yeah.
I guess in my physical mind, I'm just thinking sun to us to back to the sun. But it does make sense that would resonate across the whole universe
Yes.
because we're not in a space-bound box.
Right. See, this
So
is
I
the
think
thing
that's
about
why
that.
where I got lost.
Okay, this is the thing about it. Those portals bring energy to the entire earth. Okay. Got me?
Yes.
Which means that everyone on the earth are recipients of the energy. But the energy will not override your desires. The energy will not override your thoughts. If you are open to embracing the divinity that these energies represent, then not only are you a recipient, you are also a participant in the dispersal of the understanding of these energies by virtue of what we are doing right now. And we say we are putting it in the macro, which means that we are dispersing the energy in the macro because even though people are not hearing or receiving it, or even though they don't have a desire as we do, they are open to change. And because we have been granted the authority to dominate, not to subjugate, but to dominate, because we have been granted that authority, when we put truth into the macro, those who are searching for change begins to get an inkling of what change is. And the result of that is when you see a rise in people protesting against the genocide in Gaza, something that has never happened before. Does that make sense? Or is that a good example or a poor example?
That's a good example. Because that leads me to the other day I'd talked about being sad for Trump in particular at that particular moment. So everyone has like you said, the energy is not going to override whatever his desires are. And in that's his free will as
For lack of a better term, yes.
okay.
See, when I say it won't override the energy, right? Or his desires, rather. I'm not talking about it doesn't have the power to. I'm saying it won't. However, the desires of the righteous has the power to override every desire that is adversarial to spirituality. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. That does.
If that was not true, the desires that we had for exposure of everything that we needed to address would never have taken place because it would have remained hidden. Can you see that?
I can see that.
So you're basically saying though that that a person can resist the energy, but the desire for harmony and balance is much stronger than anybody's resistance.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. An example of that, Audrey, would be when we talk about the root of the tree. That root's desire for that tree to reach towards the light is far stronger than the resistance that it meets.
Yeah. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you,
Okay.
Faith.
Because all of us takes a village, honey. So the extension, let me ask this first. The response to that question, is it sufficient to the person who sent it to you, or will they send you a text saying that, or Ron, do you see the answer or the response as being an answer to that question?
I see a response. I would prefer though for the person either speak up or send me a text to make sure, because a lot has been said.
Okay. So if the
Okay, I
person,
just got the text. So thank you. The question has been answered.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's important. Okay, thanks. The other
Thank
thing
you.
that I want to extend there, and I'm done for tonight, is this. It is my contention that the body is a reminder. The life of the body is a reminder that all life is spiritual. We have been taught through those who have studied anatomy and physiology. We have been taught that the principal organ in the body, in terms of the body surviving, is the heart. because it pumps blood throughout the body, and through the blood, the body receives its nutrients and blah, 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 its iron, all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
That's what we've been taught. It is my contention that the most important organs in the body are the lungs. The lungs are the lungs are the organs or other organs that receive spirit. Because spirit is breath. The lungs receive spirit. And if the lungs does not receive spirit, nothing in the body can function. Everything in the body needs an infusion of spirit in order for it to stay alive. Does that make sense? So our Creator is constantly giving us CPR. We're on a ventilator. We are constantly being ventilated. We cannot, what we call life support. That life support in my day was the ventilator when I was a respiratory therapist. All it did was give you oxygen, give you air. As long as your lungs function, everything else stayed alive. That's all I'm saying. Your brain can be dead. Your brain doesn't have to be functional, but as long as your organs receive what? Breath, spirit. I remember when one of my nieces had a car accident, and the doctors pronounced her as being brain dead. There was no brain activity at all, but she was on life support. And her daddy chose to give her organs to those who were in need of them. And they left her on life support. So her organs could continuously be oxygenated for the express purpose of distribution. Does that make sense? So, what am I saying to you? Your body does not die. It doesn't. You, spirit, you exit the body. And the body returns to its source, just like you return to your source. The source from which you came in order to occupy this body is what you return to. And that source is a source of ancestral life. Does that make sense?
It does.
And that ancestral life is what sustains us. Evan, you were saying something?
No, it makes sense. No, I was saying that it does make a lot of sense. Yes.
Roger? Were you about to say something? You are muted.
No, I was just waving. I have to leave. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Whatever you're going to do, enjoy.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Anyway, I hope that all makes sense to you guys. Any questions or comments? And I know we said a lot tonight.
We did. It's okay though.
So now it's 7:25.
I want to tell you,
Go ahead.
in fact, that scripture.
You break it up. Evan, you break it up. You break it up, Evan. Evan, we could not hear you. You break it up, my
Okay.
dear.
I said about Proverbs 6 chapter.
You still breaking up. Go ahead.
The scripture about the ant is in Proverbs 6 chapter,
Oh, okay.
the 6th through the 11th verse.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Told you, I don't doubt it's there. I just didn't know where. Okay. Any questions or comments? I am very grateful
Well,
for your patience. Oh, go ahead. 7:35. Go ahead.
yeah, and again, I just wanted to, confer in terms of what Evelyn just mentioned. But what was real interesting, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise."
Say that again, George. Consider what?
Consider her ways
Your ways.
and be wise.
So it's talking about the queen. Out of all those tens of thousands of ants, it's saying consider the ways of the queen, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I
That's
think
powerful.
that's what you referred to at the beginning when we were talking about, the foundation or the principles of Maya.
Yes.
It's the goddess Maya who gave us the earliest, most oldest writings with regards to spiritual instructions and morality. But again, the
Yes.
goddess Maya.
And at some point, not tonight, but at some point, we're going to talk about that. Not only the goddess Mayat, but talk about the principle of Mayat, where your heart must be lighter than the feather. What that actually means when it talks about if it's not, then you enter the netherland, the netherworld, that kind of stuff. At some point, we're going to talk about that because I do think that not only is it pertinent to the journey we're on, but it's important that we understand that based upon what we have been taught about hell, about hell and reincarnation, that kind of thing. All right. But thanks again for all of you. I appreciate your patience and your input through your energy or your words, or both. You guys have a good evening, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Go ahead and yes, that's it.
Peace.
Saturday. Say again? Oh, peace.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Evening.
Bye. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Bye.